there comes a moment when your soul just snaps. Not with anger, not with noise, but with a quiet kind of finality, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. You just wake up one day and you're done. Done explaining, done proving, done trying to make people see what they've already decided they don't want to understand. You've replayed the same conversations in your head 1,000 times, haven't you? You've rewritten your words, softened your tone, added context, removed emotion, and still, somehow, they twisted it. Still, they took your truth and turned it into something you barely recognized. You started to think maybe it was your fault. Maybe if you'd said it better. Maybe if you'd stayed calmer. Maybe if you'd just smiled through the disrespect. They'd finally get it. But they won't. Because they never wanted to. People like that don't misunderstand you by accident. They misunderstand you by design. They need you to be the problem. It keeps their illusion intact. It keeps them feeling righteous. It keeps them in control. And so, you defend yourself again, and again, and again, until you realize that defending yourself has become a full-time job you never applied for. You're exhausted, not because you're weak, but because you've been fighting for clarity in a room full of people who thrive on confusion. There's a heaviness that comes with constantly needing to explain your heart. A loneliness that settles in when you realize the people closest to you only hear you when it benefits them. And it hits you. You've been begging to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. That's the breaking point. That's the moment your spirit whispers, enough. It doesn't scream. It doesn't rage. It just attaches. Quietly, completely. Because your peace finally becomes more important than being right. Your silence finally becomes, well, I only feel safer than being seen. And in that stillness, something shifts. You stop reaching. You stop explaining. You stop performing for people who never deserved a front row seat to your becoming. The breaking point isn't your downfall. It's your awakening. It's the day you realize you no longer owe the world a translation of your soul. You don't need to justify the way you love, the way you grow, the way you protect your peace. Because those who truly see you don't need an explanation. And those who don't never will. You thought if you shared your heart carefully, honestly, vulnerably, they'd finally understand what you meant. But the truth is, some people are not misunderstanding you by mistake. They are misunderstanding you on purpose, because seeing your truth would force them to confront their own lies. Understanding you would mean admitting what they did, or what they refused to do. And that kind of honesty, it would shatter the illusion they built to protect themselves. So they twist your words instead. They poke at your tone. They question your intentions. They make you feel like the problem for daring to defend yourself. And suddenly, you find yourself apologizing for being honest. You start doubting your own emotions. You start shrinking your truth so it won't sound too loud, too emotional, too much. You start speaking in smaller sentences, hoping they'll hurt less when ignored. But here's what you didn't realize. Every time you explain yourself to the wrong person, you hand over a piece of your power. Every clarification becomes a silent confession. I still care what you think of me. And that's what keeps you trapped. The invisible need to be seen as good. To prove that your intentions were pure. To make them understand your heart when they've already chosen not to care. You carry that weight like armor, but it's not protecting you. It's crushing you. Every explanation bends your spine just a little lower. Every attempt to justify yourself drains another ounce of your peace. You start to forget that your truth doesn't need their approval to exist. It's like walking through a storm, shouting your truth into the wind. But the wind never answers. It only takes your words and throws them back, distorted, unrecognizable. And you begin to wonder, what's the point of screaming into storms that were never meant to hear you? Because that's what explaining yourself to the wrong people feels like. Trying to light a candle in a hurricane. You strike match after match, desperate for someone to notice the flame. And all they do is blame you for the smoke. The weight of explanation doesn't just silence your voice. It erases your confidence. It convinces you that being misunderstood is a reflection of your failure, when in truth, it's proof of your growth. Because the moment you evolve beyond someone's limited perception, they will no longer recognize you. And instead of asking why you changed, they'll say you've changed. They'll say it like an accusation, not a compliment. They won't see that your silence isn't arrogance. It's peace. That your distance isn't pride. It's protection. They'll call you cold because you no longer bleed for their comfort. They'll call you selfish because you finally started loving yourself correctly. And maybe that's the hardest part. Realizing that no matter how clearly you speak, some people can't hear you because your frequency offends their comfort. You've outgrown the language of your past. You've learned to speak in truth, while they still trade in denial. So stop trying to translate your soul for those who sold their ears to gossip. Stop breaking yourself down into smaller words just to fit their small understanding. Your truth doesn't need to be simplified. It just needs to be yours. You've spent years explaining yourself to people who never deserved your honesty. Now it's time to explain yourself to no one. And let your evolution do the talking. Because the people meant for you will feel your truth without needing it spelled out. And the rest, let them choke on their assumptions. There's a shift that happens, not loud, not explosive, but deep, like something ancient inside you finally remembering its own power. It doesn't happen in front of anyone. It happens in the quiet aftermath, after the argument, after the heartbreak, after the 1,000th time you were misunderstood. You sit there in the silence, and for the first time, you don't reach for your phone. You don't draft the message. You don't rehearse your defense. You just breathe. And it hits you. The world didn't end when you stopped explaining yourself. No lightning struck. No one came to rescue you or ruin you. The silence didn't destroy you. It freed you. That's the turning point. The moment you realize peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being untouched. It comes from knowing that your truth exists, with or without their approval. You used to believe silence was weakness. You thought if you didn't explain, you were letting them win. But now you see it clearly. Silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. It's strength. It's the declaration that says, I don't need to fight to prove what's already real. Because explaining yourself was never about clarity. It was about craving validation. And when you stop craving validation, you reclaim your energy. You stop bleeding into conversations that only wanted your weakness. You stop pouring light into people who preferred the shadows. There's a strange kind of power in restraint. When you know you could defend yourself, but you choose not to. When you know you could expose their lies, but you let karma do its quiet work. That's not passivity. That's mastery. And here's the truth. Your silence is not empty. It's full of things they'll never understand. It's full of dignity, full of boundaries, full of unspoken strength that says, I know what I lived through. I don't need you to validate it. You see, Silence doesn't mean you've given up. It means you've leveled up. It means you've learned that defending yourself keeps you trapped in their story. But walking away writes your own. And the people who used to provoke you, they'll start wondering why their words don't hit the same anymore. Why their manipulation doesn't move you. Why their absence doesn't scare you. It's because you've reached that sacred place where you no longer need their understanding to feel at peace. That's when your glow-up begins. Not when you're louder, but when you're calmer. Not when you prove them wrong, but when you stop needing to. Your growth is not a show. It's a quiet revolution. Every time you choose silence over chaos, truth over defense, peace over explanation, you rise. You rise beyond their reach. You rise beyond their version of you. You rise into yourself. And that's the beauty of it. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need validation. You just needed clarity. And now that you have it, you're untouchable. There's a fire that starts to burn the moment you stop begging to be understood. It doesn't burn with rage. It burns with truth. It's the kind of fire that doesn't destroy you. It refines you. It melts away the versions of you that were built on apology. It burns off the dead weight of pretending. And all that's left is you. You've been made to believe that defending yourself is strength. But real strength is walking away, knowing you could have said everything, and choosing to say nothing. Because silence doesn't mean you lost the argument. It means the argument is no longer worth winning. You start to realize, every time you fought to be believed, you were really just trying to be loved. You wanted to be seen, to be known, to be forgiven for being human. But you don't need forgiveness for becoming who you are. You need freedom. Freedom from the guilt of outgrowing people. Freedom from the noise of trying to explain what evolution looks like. Freedom from the chains of your old self, who thought peace had to be earned through validation. The fire within you starts to whisper. You owe no one an explanation for your becoming. You don't have to explain why you walked away. You don't have to explain why you're quieter now, why you love yourself differently, why you stopped showing up for people who stopped showing up for you. Growth doesn't need subtitles. Your transformation doesn't need witnesses. And yes, they'll talk. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're cold. They'll say you think you're better now. But they'll never admit the truth, that they never thought you'd actually find the strength to leave the version of yourself that served them so well. That's the part that terrifies them, because the moment you stop defending yourself, you stop playing their game. And people who control through guilt and confusion, they lose power when you no longer explain. Your silence makes them face themselves, and some people would rather hate you than do that. So let them. Let them hate you. Let them misunderstand you. Let them build entire stories about you from fragments they invented. Because that's not your fire to put out anymore. Your fire is sacred now. It doesn't burn for arguments. It burns for purpose. It burns for peace. It burns for every version of you that stayed silent for too long out of fear, and now chooses silence out of strength. You'll start to notice it. Your energy comes back. Your sleep feels deeper. Your thoughts feel clearer. You stop explaining, and suddenly, your words carry more weight. Not because they're louder, but because they're rarer. This is what happens when you take your power back. You stop speaking to be understood and start speaking to be heard by yourself. You stop living for clarity and start living for truth. You stop chasing peace and start embodying it. That's the fire within you. Steady, powerful, unapologetic. It doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need to defend. It just is. There's a moment, quiet, holy, unstoppable, when the dust finally settles and you realize you didn't lose them. You released them. You didn't fall apart. You shed what was never real. And for the first time in your life, you feel light. That's what rising feels like. It doesn't look like a movie scene. It doesn't sound like applause. It's not a sudden explosion of success or revenge. It's subtle. It's spiritual. It's the sound of your peace returning home. You start doing things differently. You stop answering questions that don't deserve your energy. You stop explaining boundaries that should have been respected. You stop showing up to prove your worth because you finally know it. You walk into rooms softer, quieter, yet somehow more powerful than ever before. You begin to see how much strength it takes to stay calm when you could destroy. How much courage it takes to stay silent when you could expose. You understand that true power doesn't need to prove. It just exists. And that's when your presence starts speaking louder than your explanations ever could. They'll notice. They'll notice you've changed, but they won't understand how. They'll call it distance, but it's discernment. They'll call it pride, but it's peace. They'll call it selfishness, but it's self-respect. You no longer dance for attention. You walk in purpose. You no longer fight to be understood. You move in clarity. You no longer wait for validation. You validate yourself by standing tall in your silence. Because here's what they never told you about rising. It's not a scream. It's a stillness. It's not fire for destruction. It's fire for direction. It's knowing that what's meant for you will find you once you stop defending what was breaking you. You rise when you finally stop explaining your evolution to people who preferred you broken. You rise when you no longer need to prove that you've healed. You rise when you realize that walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's understanding that silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is happening. Inside you, quietly, powerfully, purposefully. Because rising isn't about revenge. It's about release. It's about letting the version of you that begged for understanding finally rest. It's about looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I don't need to be understood anymore. I just need to be free. You rise when you start living from truth, not trauma. You rise when you start protecting your peace instead of defending your pain. You rise when you realize that not explaining yourself isn't indifference. It's maturity. It's what happens when you stop reacting and start becoming. And yes, it will confuse people. Your calm will disturb their chaos. Your peace will expose their unrest. Your silence will echo louder than your explanations ever did. But that's the cost of freedom. Peace doesn't come cheap. You rise not above others, but above the version of yourself that used to need their approval. You rise out of the narrative that told you to prove your goodness. You rise beyond the noise, the guilt, the misunderstanding. You rise into your own power, your own timing, your own truth. And that's when you realize you never needed them to understand your light. You just needed to stop dimming it. Because once you stop defending yourself, the universe starts defending you. Life begins to align. Opportunities appear. Peace follows you like a shadow that no one can steal. You become undeniable. You become untouchable. You become you. There comes a moment, after the breaking, after the silence, after the fire, when you finally see yourself clearly for the first time. No noise, no filters, no explanations, just you. And it's almost overwhelming, because you realize how much of your life was spent fighting for clarity in other people's chaos. You were trying to make them understand what they never had the capacity to see. You were trying to heal in a place that fed on your pain. And now, here you are, standing in the ashes of what used to be your constant need to explain. You're not empty. You're lighter. This is the final flame, the one that doesn't burn in anger. It burns in truth. It's the fire that whispers, I am done defending who I am. Because defending yourself is just another form of permission seeking. It's a subtle way of saying, please see me right. But you've outgrown that. You've outgrown needing to be seen correctly. Now you just need to be seen by yourself. They already know the truth. That's why they twist it. They already know your heart. That's why they test it. They already know your worth. That's why they pretend not to. And once you realize that, once you see through the performance, it becomes impossible to go back to explaining yourself. Let them talk. Let them lie. Let them misunderstand you 1,000 times over. Their words can't touch what your silence protects. Because silence isn't emptiness. It's your sanctuary. And every time you choose not to defend, you declare that your peace is no longer up for debate. You stop defending your past. You stop defending your decisions. You stop defending your transformation. Because growth doesn't need to be justified. It just needs to be lived. You don't heal by proving you were right. You heal by no longer needing to be. You don't rise by arguing your worth. You rise by embodying it. And that's where you find freedom, not in being understood, not in being forgiven, but in realizing you don't need either to move forward. The people who truly see you, they'll feel your truth in your silence. They'll recognize your strength in your distance. They'll meet you where your peace begins, not where your pain ended. Those are your people. The rest were lessons. You become stronger when you stop defending yourself, because the moment you stop, you reclaim your time, your energy, your mind. You stop letting other people narrate your story. You take the pen back and start writing from a place of truth, not reaction. And your life, it starts to shift. You start attracting people who don't need explanations to trust you. You start building things that don't collapse when misunderstood. You start glowing. Not because you're trying to prove a point, but because you've finally learned the beauty of not having to. That's your glow up. Not revenge, not validation. Revelation. The quiet knowing that you no longer owe the world a version of yourself that makes them comfortable. So let them misunderstand. Let them underestimate. Let them keep guessing your peace while you live it. Because your silence now is not weakness. It's proof that you've transcended the need to be heard by those who were never listening. It's the sound of your healing solidifying into strength. You don't need to defend the truth. The truth defends itself in time. And when that time comes, when the noise fades and the masks fall, they'll remember every moment you stayed silent, and they'll finally realize why. You didn't disappear. You evolved. You didn't lose. You released. You didn't grow cold. You grew free. So walk in your silence. Walk in your power. Walk in your truth. Because you become unstoppable the moment you stop defending yourself. And that's the flame that never goes out.